Welcome to r/Malicious Compliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter but not the spirit of a request. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story, company owing us around $30,000 for what could have been a simple and quick $12,000. The second story, I worked hard, but the bosses didn't like it, so I started to work less. The third story, the city didn't make money because the guy didn't want to sell his piece of land. On to the first story. Permits, you say? Say goodbye to your unit. Some background. I work for an HVAC, heating and air conditioning company in California that specializes in commercial maintenance and installs. We're more of a niche service, as we retrofit new units onto existing buildings, which is more difficult than a brand new construction project. The reason why is because California does not mess around when it comes to their building codes, to a point where their regulation becomes excessive and unnecessary. Because of this, a lot of the more seasoned property managers and contractors avoid pulling permits with cities for like replacements, meaning an old unit is being replaced with another of the same size, making no changes to structural or mechanical stability, because it can delay a project by months or sometimes outright destroy it. My company has high integrity and would never run a job that wasn't 100% safe. We always perform the installs to code and normally refuse to lose that integrity for cheaper work or to submit to a willful property manager. I'm also a woman in her late 20s who sounds 18. I bid the new units and design the duct systems, very uncommon and relevant to the story. Now, the story. This happened last year, so it may not be 100% accurate in correspondence. We were bidding a project for a larger 10-ton unit in California to a facility management company based in the Midwest. I had a nice rapport with the account manager of this particular property, and everything was going smoothly over the phone. I emailed the bid of around $12,000 for a direct replacement of the existing unit, which meant setting the unit on sleepers, 4x4 blocks of wood to distribute weight evenly, and a new sheet metal plenum, box that pressurizes the air to blow into the ductwork and cool the building. Now, in every bid, I include a disclaimer that excludes permits. The account manager notices this, and I give him my spiel, basically what I explained above with more depth. I should mention that he was not familiar with HVAC work. At this point, he goes, "Okay, I'll pass this on to my boss, and let's get this going." Now the outrage. I can't say much about this guy's boss, except for he was a major misogynist who didn't understand HVAC and was so overconfident that he introduced his email with his full name, first, middle, and last, even though his email signature already had all that. For this story, we'll call him A-hole. Here's how the phone call correspondence went down after initial emails. A-hole. This is A-hole. I'm not familiar with California regulation, but what kind of company doesn't pull permits? Are you the secretary? Who can I speak to about this? Me. Hello, I'm not the secretary, I made your bid. Same spiel about not doing the permits, but I'm more than happy to include the permits. Just give me a few days to get in touch with the city for pricing. Each city is different and usually only has 1 or 2 people who can explain their building requirements and pricing. It can sometimes take over a week just to get this information. A-hole. Absolutely not. I know you couldn't have done the bid because you're a woman. There are no woman technicians, and you sound too young to be in that kind of position. Give me the salesman, sweetie. I understand you're probably the first line of defense, but I'm the regional manager of this account, and I need to speak to someone who knows what they're talking about. At this point, I realized this guy didn't listen to one word I said and wasted our time. Unfortunately, I'm used to being treated this way, so I defaulted him to my boss. He has no problem stepping in with irate customers and has magic diffusing power. My boss. Hi, is there a problem? A-hole. You know your receptionist is claiming she's the saleswoman on my job? You should write her up or something. You'll lose customers that way. My boss. Actually, she's my best saleswoman for commercial jobs and designs the ductwork better than the engineers do. But what can I help you with? A-hole. Wow. Anyways, she isn't that good, and she failed to include permits and the CA Title 24 testing. These need to be included in all our bids. We're not ghetto. My boss. Sure, I'll have Captain Tiggos make a new bid. I had explained the situation to my boss prior to him taking the call. He wasn't going to bother arguing with this ignorant guy. He had more important duties as a VP and knew what would happen to the job. So this guy is from the Midwest, right? The job happened in a city where it was known to have some of the toughest regulations. And so begins malicious compliance. I make another bid that's now closer to $16,000, and they pay for the permits up front. You'll understand why in a minute. However, they liked my bid so much the first time around, they didn't want to change anything else. Reed, A-hole didn't listen when I said since we're permitting, we need to omit the sleepers and put down a curb adapter to keep costs down, and because obviously I'm a woman who didn't know WTF I was talking about. We get going on the permits, and what do you know? The inspector needs mechanical and structural plans because sleepers are no longer acceptable per code. Now that we're changing weight, the plans are required. Another $1,500. Oh, and the curb adapter is something that is fabricated and requires more labor to install. Another $1,500. And now the unit is too high up, sitting on the curb adapter. The roof needs a screen wall to cover the unit because the city likes to keep things pretty. Time to bring in a roofing contractor. Another couple thousand. Anyways, you can all see where this is going. By the end of it, the company got cut off by their client, the people in the building, because of all the extra addendums. Since they were cut off, we had to remove the unit per the city and cap the drops. Another $1,700. And the client was stuck with portable units to cool their giant space, which a-hole also had to pay us for. Pretty sure by the end of it, they ended up owing us around $30,000 for what could have been a simple and quick $12,000. A-hole lost the client, and we never heard from him again. The account manager I used to talk to let us know that a-hole got his A chewed out and demoted until he proves his competence. The next story is, you want me to work less? All right, you're the boss. I'm an old senior developer. This story is from the times when I climbed the ladder and become a senior for the first time in the energy industry in my country. Summer was coming. Despite my several attempts to delay a GIS, Geographical Information Systems, roughly mapping the assets and values for other integrations project, my project manager decided it was the best time to collect data in the most rainy season in a rural area. The upper management was on the move, seeking a head for the chopping block to pay for the inefficiency of the project and the money lost for nearly useless data. You can't ask for efficiency from a worker when he's working under heavy rain, with a thick layer of mud on the ground and GPS spewing nonsense. What can I say? I had warned them. I was a hard-working developer. I loved to code. I'd often do overtime without asking for anything in return, train myself about the new technologies, and do everything within my power to ease the job of the field crew. You know, the best candidates to be blamed. It all started when I decided to take my annual leave for an early holiday near the sea. A well-respected comrade from another branch called, asked for a rush job about a detailed data migration. I reached the people at the branch, spoke to the management, promised I'd do whatever possible, and spent nearly 40 hours non-stop in front of the computer at home, finishing the migration. When I got back from the holiday, surprise, my project manager wanted to speak to me. He asked me where I was for the last 2 days before my holiday. It was weird, because he was CC'd to the mail exchange and he actually knew. I told him I had worked on the migration non-stop. He was having none of it. Work had to be done at the workplace. Company lawyer got called. I got asked for a statement about my absence. I can't tell you how peeved I was. I clearly mentioned it was company policy, allowing coders working from home in emergencies. The VPN records and the job done easily showed I did work much more than I was supposed to during those 2 days. The response to my statement was a new rule, disallowing coders from working anywhere but at the office, during usual office hours. I calmly headed to the HR, told them I was taking back my permission to be assigned overtime at all. In my country's laws, a written permission of the worker must be taken before he can be assigned overtime legally. When asked about the reason, I told what happened and said that I would never ever work even a minute outside my hours again. I also started taking much more care about the breaks and started using every single second of them. Off the record, demoralized as I was, I didn't give my 100% to the job anyway. I also dusted off my CV and started looking for a new job. Thankfully, this was a right decision by me. In my contract, I had agreed to traveling for business reasons. I also had a 4-year-old daughter, another 6-month-old daughter, and we had started living in that city for that job, so we didn't have familiar folks to look after my wife. My project manager's next step was assigning me to a meter replacement project in another city. This was bull droppings. Anything that required coding, I could do easily from where I was, and my responsibilities in the main branch sometimes required me to be physically there, especially meetings. When I asked for how long I was assigned there, the project manager grinned like the idiot he is and said, for the time being. 2 people can play the game of contracts and laws. Our labor laws clearly indicate if a worker is assigned a job outside his city, the weekly commute should be done during office hours. So I got even happier when I learned that the project manager decided, because the job isn't urgent, I was supposed to go by train or bus, not an airplane. First week I got on the train at 9 a.m., managing to get to the branch office at roughly 4:30 p.m. Day done, day done. On Friday I left the office roughly at 10:30 a.m., so if they want me to work only 3 days a week, who am I to refuse? I should confess I started working at roughly 10% of my capacity during that week. I was getting very nice responses from the defense sector in my country, and I was confident I could land a job a few days after I got fired. The project manager couldn't simply back down and assign me back to the main branch, so I spent 3 weeks in another city, working roughly 3 days a week. During that time, Our labor laws clearly declare that one worker can't be singled out about break times if people of the same level are in similar behavior. Because a senior developer there didn't simply care about breaks and clock in and out times, I followed his example. He was untouchable, with good connections to the upper management. They couldn't punish him, so they couldn't punish me. I remember once giving a nearly 5-hour lunch break with him to eat fish in a fancy restaurant with the view of Bosphorus. That senior developer was also a very heavy smoker and coffee addict. Once an hour, he'd call me outside to accompany him to have coffee and a smoke. Later, he said he was supposed to look over my shoulder and check my job. He couldn't care less. He'd instead sit in my room for hours at a time, speaking about times past, our families, office gossip, anything but the job itself. I was kindly asked to quit, but it was past my second year in that company. That meant they were supposed to pay me roughly about 3 months' pay as severance, then roughly another 2 months as notice if they wanted to fire me instantly. There was absolutely no recording in that meeting, so I calmly explained I'd keep on my 3-day relaxed weekly shifts until they fired me. During my 4th week, I was called to the project co-manager's room and got fired with my severance and penalty for the notice. 15 minutes after I left the office, I was accepted to my new job. The project in the branch office got completed successfully, mostly because there was no need for a developer there at all. The project manager didn't get fired, but he just got demoted to engineer. Hopefully, I'll never have to mess with such a manager again in my life. And the last story is, local hero sticks it to City Hall. This happened quite a few years ago. Where my hometown is a thing called ALR, Agriculture Land Reserve. Basically, there are areas of land that can only ever be used for agriculture, in order to protect prime agriculture land from becoming highways and strip malls and things like that. A friend of a friend, Fred, had inherited a piece of such land on the outskirts of the city. He had no interest in doing any kind of farming, but the ALR rules allow for the property owner to have a personal residence on the land, so he built a house on it and had a nice place to live just outside of town. Now, City Hall has ways of acquiring ALR land and using it for non-agriculture purposes. I'm not familiar with how exactly, but they can, and it's about impossible for anybody else to. One thing the city would do is acquire ALR land and turn it into condo developments. They had a vision for 3 high-end condos to be built where Fred's property was. They had already bought the properties on either side of Fred's land and were going after his too. The city was only offering Fred the property value, and since he just built a house there, he'd be losing on the deal, so Fred said no. While the condos on either side of Fred were being constructed, the city used every tool they could to try and expropriate Fred's land, but the ALR restrictions made it tricky. Finally, they told Fred that since his land was ALR, he needed to be using it for agriculture within 30 days, or they could take it from him. Fred's response? Pig farm. He crammed as many pigs onto his property that he legally could. Full compliance with farming regulations, health and safety, whole 9 yards. Since he had fulfilled his obligations with the ALR, the city couldn't touch him. The city had already pre-sold a number of these condos, and naturally none of the buyers were very happy to have spent a small fortune to live next to a big stinky pig farm. Most of the buyers obtained grounds for dismissal on their purchase agreements, while the rest filed a big lawsuit. The city's project was sinking fast. The city started negotiating with Fred, and the story ends with the city finally making Fred an offer for his land that was so ridiculous, he had no choice but to accept. The city finished their condo project, but thanks to Fred, they didn't make nearly as much off of it as they had anticipated. Thank you for watching and supporting the channel. See you in the next video.